I'm Riley Hayes, 28 years old, and my family has always overlooked me, treating me as if I were merely background noise. They saw me as the dependable child, the one who'd manage independently, which essentially freed them from having to notice me. All their focus, compliments, and "we're so proud of you" declarations were reserved for my older brother and his seemingly brilliant existence. My recognition usually amounted to a casual, "That's nice, honey," uttered distractedly as they scrolled through a group chat, eager for news of his latest achievement. This Christmas was slated to revolve around him once more. Mom referred to it as a small celebration for your brother's big promotion, making me feel like an insignificant accessory at his event. They were completely unaware that only weeks prior, I'd transferred a sum into my bank account exceeding what our entire family had ever collectively earned. They had no inkling that my little side project, which they often dismissed with eye rolls and labeled a diversion from a proper career, had actually become a company acquired for $170 million. Seated at the table, I gazed at the ham and the assorted festive plates, listening to their usual effusive praise for him, the familiar ache resonating in my chest. Eventually, my brother crossed a line with one too many condescending remarks about my modest nurse's salary and my adorable little business. I met his gaze, and with as much nonchalance as I could muster, stated, "I sold my company." He smirked, then scoffed. "Your trivial, good-for-nothing business. How much did it fetch?" My reply was succinct. 170 million. His jaw literally fell open. My mother's face blanched. My father's fork clattered onto his plate, having slipped from his grasp. The events that followed irrevocably altered our family dynamic, not in the sentimental, heartwarming style of a holiday film they preferred to imagine. Before I recount my brother's next words and my actions after leaving that table, I have a quick request. Please share the current time and your location in the comments. It's fascinating to see how widely these intricate family narratives resonate. As Riley Hayes, I quickly understood that affection within our home operated on a hierarchy, and I was consistently positioned lower down. I was the child who earned science fair accolades and straight A's in biology. In contrast, my older brother scored decisive touchdowns and had his name broadcast over the stadium speakers. It's easy to guess whose achievements our parents chose to display. They labeled me low maintenance, as if it were a commendation. "Chloe doesn't require all that attention," my mom would remark, while meticulously adjusting my brother's tie for the third time before his various award events. Upon my acceptance into a highly competitive nursing program with a scholarship, my dad offered a casual, "That's wonderful, honey. Nurses are valuable." He then promptly redirected his attention to ask my brother Ethan about his progress in his business major. It felt as if my life served only as an prelude to his main event. The ironic truth was, their neglect made me formidable. As they remained fixated on Ethan's impressive moments, I was mastering EKG interpretation, IV insertion, and maintaining composure during critical patient emergencies. Immediately after graduation, I secured a position as a night shift ER nurse. My family, however, never grasped the immense turmoil I navigated nightly. We stabilized individuals suffering from car accidents, strokes, and overdoses. At 3:00 a.m., I often made decisions that determined whether someone would recover consciousness or not. During brief lulls between emergencies and documentation, when other nurses typically checked their phones, I began outlining an idea on scraps of paper. I continually observed recurring issues: disorganized staffing, ineffective patient handoffs, and perilous delays due to a lack of real-time awareness of personnel and patient status. Therefore, with assistance from Sofia Garcia, a programmer friend from my university, I initiated the development of a platform named PulseLink, designed as a real-time coordination system for emergency departments. Initially, it existed only as a rudimentary prototype. I'd return home exhausted at 7 a.m., shower, sleep briefly, then reawaken, quickly drink coffee, and connect with Maya. We'd troubleshoot problems while my neighbors prepared their evening meals. Afterwards, I'd head back for another grueling 12-hour hospital shift. My family was privy to roughly 1% of these efforts. They simply saw me as still working night shifts, which, in my mother's interpretation, meant I wasn't pursuing anything Facebook-worthy. Conversely, they meticulously tracked every aspect of Ethan's life. He progressed from an investment analyst to an aspiring partner at his company, eventually becoming the proud owner of a condominium partially funded by our parents. They withdrew a portion of their retirement savings to assist with his down payment, framing it as an investment in his future. When I inquired if they would co-sign a modest line of credit, enabling Maya and me to leave our additional jobs and dedicate ourselves to Pulse Link, my dad chuckled and advised, "Darling, applications are temporary trends. Be practical. Remember, nursing is your safety net. Don't jeopardize it for some technological pipe dream." It was remarkable how my stable, life-preserving profession was deemed a fallback option for me, while Ethan's financial models were hailed as groundbreaking. The evening that redefined everything, I was resting during a break in the staff lounge, dozing on a plastic chair, my phone upside down on my lap. Upon finally checking my phone, I discovered 3 missed calls from an unidentified number and 1 from Maya, along with an urgent, all-caps text. "Answer your phone, we got it." My heart racing, I moved into the supply closet and returned her call. She was simultaneously weeping and laughing. The hospital board, whom we'd been pitching for months, had finally consented to trial VitalSync, and a Boston-based medical software firm we'd engaged with expressed interest in acquiring us completely. The sum they quoted caused my knees to weaken. It seemed surreal. I completed my shift in a daze, then spent the following week balancing calls with lawyers, non-disclosure agreements, and contract negotiations amidst my patient triage duties. Meanwhile, my parents forwarded me a digital invitation in the family group chat for Ethan's firm promotion party, complete with a champagne emoji and the declaration, "So proud of you, Ethan." I, however, was in a downtown glass conference room, signing over a company I had forged through relentless effort and sheer determination. When the transfer finally arrived, $170 million, after deducting legal costs, taxes, and investor shares, I was left with an amount of money far exceeding anything I'd ever imagined or known how to handle. I stared at my banking application, half expecting it to malfunction and vanish. I wept in my car, then proceeded to work that night as if nothing had occurred, because patients still required vital sign checks and medication. I refrained from telling my parents, not out of a desire for secrecy, but because I foresaw their reaction. They would diminish it, misinterpret it, or transform it into a narrative of how they always knew I'd achieve greatness, despite never having genuinely inquired about my endeavors. A week before Christmas, when my mom called to say, "We're hosting a special dinner this year for your brother's promotion. You can attend, can't you?" I nearly laughed aloud. She specified it wasn't for the family or for the holidays, but for your brother. That's when my plan truly solidified. I wouldn't arrive in expensive attire or subtly hint for attention. Instead, I would sit at that table, endure their fawning over him as if he were flawless, and when he delivered one of his typical slights about my modest nursing career, I would reveal the figure that would shatter their perceptions. Not out of spite. Well, perhaps a touch of it snorts, but primarily because I was weary of being marginalized within my own family's narrative. On Christmas Day, I parked my familiar, worn Honda curbside at my parents' house. This detail alone bolstered my strategy. There was no extravagant car, no designer purse, nothing to announce my multimillionaire status. Just me, dressed in black jeans, a gentle green sweater, and the same winter coat I'd owned since my nursing school days. The house appeared identical to every previous holiday. Lights draped haphazardly along the gutters, a plastic reindeer tilting precariously, and a faded red-bowed wreath adorning the door. From within, I could already distinguish my mother's laughter above the music and my father's resonant voice booming about some topic. I pressed my thumb against the cold doorknob, making myself breathe in slowly. This moment transcended mere finances. It was about entering the familiar arena of my upbringing and resolutely declining to reprise my accustomed role. "Chloe, you're finally here." My mother, Jennifer, was the first to greet me, exuding scents of cinnamon and perfume. She offered a brief embrace, then drew back to smooth my hair as though I were a child. "You appear fatigued. Are you still working those strenuous night shifts? I constantly advise you, dear, to seek something less demanding. You wouldn't want to suffer burnout before age 30. "It's nice to see you too, Mom," I replied, removing my boots. "Yes, still nights. Someone has to ensure people survive while you're asleep." She dismissed it with a tut-tut, as if I'd made an exaggerated jest, and turned away before I had even completed my sentence. "Your brother's already arrived," she called back, walking away. "He brought that artisanal wine. So considerate. We'll uncork it for dinner." I trailed her into the living room where, as expected, Ethan Carter stood centrally, exuding an air of proprietorship. Impeccable hair, a costly watch, and a slim-fit dress shirt with sleeves rolled. He was engrossed in a story, recounting how his boss had discreetly approached him to discuss significant future prospects. Snort's my father, David, was absorbed in his recliner, hanging on his every word. Ethan eventually spotted me, grinning as he approached, glass in hand. "You're here. I know night shifts are tough. Did they finally release you from the hospital's confinement?" "We actually no longer shackle patients to walls, but yes, they did," I responded dryly. He laughed, clearly believing himself witty. "How's that? What was it? That data thing you were tinkering with, that app." "It's been quite active," I said, maintaining a neutral expression. "A lot has transpired." "Well, don't allow it to divert you from your actual career," my dad interjected, waving his hand vaguely. "Nursing is a dependable profession, practical, and you've consistently been our sensible child, haven't you? The one who causes us no concern. Ethan, conversely, bears considerable responsibility with his company." "Precisely," Ethan affirmed, gently clinking his glass against Dad's. "High stakes, substantial earnings." They explicitly mentioned future partner before the entire team. My mom clasped her hands to her chest. "We are simply so incredibly proud of you, darling. This evening is entirely dedicated to celebrating you." I stood there, feeling unseen, a sensation I'd experienced my whole life. There it was once more. "We don't have to worry about you." While it sounded pleasant, its true implication was, "We don't consider you." I gravitated to the kitchen to assist, not from inclination, but to occupy my trembling hands. The familiar cadence of holiday meal preparation calmed me as I chopped vegetables and stirred sauces. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from Maya. It read, "Maya, you okay? Maya, remember they don't determine your worth, you do." I smiled in spite of myself and typed a reply, "Showtime soon." When we eventually took our seats at the dining table, the arrangement itself spoke volumes. Ethan was positioned centrally on one side, flanked by my parents as if he were the esteemed guest at a grand event. They had placed me at the furthest end, close to the sideboard, conveniently located for serving dishes and clearing plates. Essentially, a pre-assigned server, classic. As wine began to flow, my dad raised his glass, eyes gleaming. "To Ethan," he declared. "To his promotion, his diligence, and all his future achievements, we could not be more proud." "To Ethan, our star," my mom reiterated. I also raised my glass, partly to avoid awkwardness and partly to let them settle into their customary routine. Ethan offered a small, self-satisfied smirk as he sipped his wine, a subtle gesture indicating his clear understanding of his prominent place in the family hierarchy. "So, Chloe," he began, reclining like a television host engaging a minor guest, "still working extra shifts and consuming mediocre vending machine fare. You really need to escape that routine, little sis. Perhaps someday I can arrange an interview for you at my company." His words were delivered with a jocular facade, but an underlying condescension was palpable. It was the identical tone he'd previously used, remarking, "If your app ever earns any money, I'll purchase you something decent, like an actual handbag." My chest constricted, but this time, rather than suppressing the emotion, I allowed it to steal my resolve. I surveyed the ham, the mashed potatoes, the table's flickering centerpiece candle. Recalling every instance they'd overlooked me in favor of him, every time my accomplishments were reduced to mere footnotes to his, I concluded I had reached my limit. I didn't erupt in anger. That would have permitted them to easily dismiss my outburst as mere emotionality from Chloe. I allowed them to continue their predictable conversations. Ethan's promotion, the influential figures at his firm, and the significant clients whose names they recited despite their limited comprehension of his work. I interjected with small, noncommittal remarks, much like a nurse evaluating a patient. "Oh, wow. That's significant, and how are you feeling regarding that?" All the while, my thoughts rhythmically counted, like a conductor poised to signal the orchestra. My opportunity arose when my mom redirected her polite, perfunctory attention to me. "So, darling, how about you?" she inquired, refilling Ethan's glass before even considering mine. "Same hospital, same, what do you call it? Ward, ER, I clarified. Same emergency room, but a considerable amount has transpired this year." My dad offered a noncommittal nod. "Well, stability is key as long as you're stable. Heaven knows the world requires competent nurses." My brother let out a soft snort. "Oh, right, and she has that small app project, remember? The one she's constantly messing with." He even made air quotes. "How's that progressing? Still attempting to manifest $1 million from the universe?" Laughter rippled around the table. Their remarks stung, yet simultaneously served my purpose. They were handing me this opportunity. I carefully placed my fork down, ensuring the sound wouldn't detract from my imminent statement. "Actually," I responded, feigning disinterest, "I'm no longer aiming to manifest $1 million. Ethan tilted his head. "Oh, so you've abandoned your small dream." "No," I stated, locking eyes with him. "I sold my company." The declaration struck like glass breaking on a hard floor. The silence didn't descend instantly. Instead, the laughter gradually faded as if everyone simultaneously recognized that I wasn't jesting. My mom's smile became fixed. My dad blinked twice. Ethan furrowed his brow as if he hadn't heard me correctly. "You what?" he demanded. "I sold my company," I reiterated. VitalSync, the ER coordination platform I've developed over the past few years. The deal was finalized 3 weeks ago. His frown transformed into a relieved smirk. All right, Miss CEO. And what did your insignificant, good-for-nothing business fetch?" The term worthless carried a past. He had flung it at me during an argument last Thanksgiving when I declined to provide extra funds for another investment he sought. "You're a nurse, Chloe. You earn a decent living, but you're hardly wealthy. That app is utterly worthless until demonstrated otherwise." I had overlooked it then, but not now. I took a sip of water, keeping my hands steady, and declared, $170 million. Ethan let out an excessively loud laugh. "No way, she's kidding." My mom interjected swiftly, seemingly eager to reclaim authority over the conversation. "That's not amusing, Chloe. Discussing money is crude." "I'm not joking," I countered. $170 million. A healthcare software firm in Boston acquired PulseLink. We finalized the agreement early this month. I've secured a multi-year consulting position and equity in their parent company. After taxes and investor distributions, I'm perfectly secure. I observed the color vanish from my mom's face, as if a switch had been flicked. My dad's jaw went slack. He stared at me with the bewildered disorientation of a patient whose vital signs on a monitor contradict their physical sensations. Ethan's laughter died away abruptly. "You're fabricating this," he asserted. You don't just sell things for such an amount. You still operate that rundown car. You still reside in that apartment with the creaking stairs. If you possess that much wealth, we would surely be aware." "And why is that?" I inquired, tilting my head. "You've never once inquired about my work. You scarcely pay attention when I discuss my patients, let alone my company. You presumed you understood my entire life simply from my job title. You know my working hours, but you remain ignorant of what I've constructed during them." My mom gripped her napkin tightly. "Chloe, dear, if this is some sort of prank to spoil your brother's celebration." "I'm not attempting to spoil anything," I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "I'm simply announcing my news at a family dinner. That's what this gathering is, isn't it? Family. My dad cleared his throat, searching for a firm footing. If this is genuine, he began slowly, why didn't you inform us? Why wouldn't you approach us initially? That question actually provoked a short, bitter laugh from me. Approach you first. Like when I requested you co-sign a modest line of credit and you advised me to be realistic. Or like when I attempted to explain VitalSync's function and you declared you didn't grasp that tech stuff, then swiftly pivoted the conversation back to Ethan's quarterly bonus. The room fell silent. Ethan's gaze darted between my parents and me, a flicker of something akin to panic beginning in his eyes. He was accustomed to being the central figure in this setting. Abruptly, he was not. All right, he uttered, forcing a strained chuckle. Let's assume this is legitimate. Prove it, display your account, show me some evidence. He sounded almost desperate. Ordinarily, I would despise the notion of presenting my phone to quantify my value, but at this precise moment, I was entirely certain of my actions. Beneath the table, I launched my banking application, selected one of my accounts, and placed the phone face up between us. I didn't reveal the entirety of it, only sufficient detail. Enough zeros for my dad to gasp, and for my mom's hand to cover her mouth. Enough for Ethan's eyes to first widen, then constrict, as if he were performing complex mental calculations. Calculations that inevitably led to a single outcome. He was no longer the most accomplished child. Holy, Ethan mumbled, abruptly cutting himself off when our mom shot him the disapproving look she typically reserved for profanity or gravy spills. He fixated on the screen as though he could mentally compel the figures to alter. This is illogical. You, how? That single, diminutive word conveyed everything. You, the daughter they considered self-sufficient, the night shift nurse in practical footwear, the sibling who quietly applauded on cue as they celebrated Ethan's every stride. It's not that intricate, I stated. I identified an issue at work. I developed a solution, and influential individuals recognized its worth. They compensated me appropriately. But you never mentioned it, my mom murmured. Not a single word. We are your parents. We ought to have been informed. Should you have? I challenged. Because every time I attempted to discuss VitalSync, you interrupted me. I would try to elaborate, and you'd respond with, "That's nice, honey," then inquire about Ethan's important meeting. You were intimately familiar with every aspect of his career, yet you can't even recall the name of my hospital without considerable thought. My dad bristled. Now wait a moment. We have supported you. We've consistently been proud of you. I leaned forward, the years of suppressed words finally erupting. You supported Ethan. You tapped into your retirement savings to help with his condominium. You co-signed for his initial car. 2 years ago, when he spectacularly failed with that supposedly foolproof investment, you labeled it a learning opportunity. Yet, when I requested even a small portion of similar backing, you warned me I was acting irresponsibly. Ethan's complexion reddened. That's unjust, he retorted sharply. They recognized my genuine potential. You were merely tinkering with code on your laptop. Are you referring to the code you ridiculed when I presented the preliminary dashboard? I inquired. The very one you dismissed as a school assignment before snapping a picture and sending it to your friends for a laugh. He began to speak, then closed his mouth. The recollection evidently struck a chord. Our mother glanced between us, visibly disturbed. We weren't aware, she whispered. We truly didn't realize its significance. Why didn't you insist more forcefully? Compel us to pay attention. And there it was. The fault was redirected toward me, predictable. Because I was exhausted, I stated softly. Weary of pleading with my own parents for recognition beyond being a mere prop in Ethan's triumphs. Exhausted from detailing my existence to individuals who had already formed their conclusions about me. The atmosphere in the room felt oppressive, the air warm even with the snowfall outside. My father gently placed his fork on the table, seemingly forgotten. So, what happens next? He questioned, his voice surprisingly subdued. You're wealthy. You no longer require our help. I never sought financial assistance from you, I responded. My need was for your concern. I needed you to genuinely look at me and perceive more than just someone who would invariably manage, regardless of circumstances. Ethan abruptly shoved his chair backward, its legs grating loudly against the floor. "So what's your point? Did you come here to show off?" He challenged. "To embarrass me? To make them feel remorseful? Couldn't you have simply informed us like a regular individual? Instead, you had to choose my celebratory dinner." "Are you referring to the Christmas dinner my parents rechristened in honor of your promotion?" I retorted. "The very event they presented to me as your brother's significant evening. If this truly concerns family and isn't solely about adoring you, then why does my achievement register as an assault?" He fixed me with a glare, his jaw tightening. "You consistently acted like the aggrieved party," he asserted. "You never requested anything more. You never expressed a desire for prominence." "I wasn't seeking attention," I clarified. "I desired space to simply be. There's a distinction." Another profound quiet descended. I could perceive my parents attempting to process everything, mentally revising years of familial narrative on the spot. That burden was theirs, not mine. My purpose here wasn't to manage their remorse. I was here to definitively, completely emerge from the confined role they had imposed upon me. I retrieved my phone and secured it. "I didn't arrive here to plead for affirmation," I declared, pushing my chair away. "I came to inform you of the person I've become. Whether you can accept that is entirely your decision." As I rose, my mother extended her hand to my wrist. "Chloe, please wait," she implored. We just require some time. This is overwhelming." "I've afforded you 28 years," I rejoined. "Time is not the fundamental problem." I departed from the table, moving past the Christmas tree and the stockings bearing our names, past the family portraits adorning the hall, most showcasing Ethan prominently, with me indistinctly at the periphery. In the hallway mirror, I caught sight of my reflection, composed, not fragmented. This observation astonished me. I was no longer the anxious girl of 16, yearning for her parents to acknowledge her from the stands. I was a woman who had constructed something revolutionary while they remained oblivious. Whether they ever grasped this reality was no longer a matter of paramount importance to me. I hadn't gone far before the confrontation escalated. "Chloe." Ethan's voice pursued me down the corridor, piercing and uncharacteristically unrefined. I turned just as he reached me, his typically composed demeanor visibly fractured. "You can't simply unleash such a revelation and then depart." "Observe me," I stated. "I've dedicated my entire existence to suppressing things so you wouldn't feel endangered." Threatened, he let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Do you honestly believe I feel intimidated by you?" "You are now," I asserted. We exchanged gazes, the unspoken rivalry of years now strikingly, vividly articulated. My parents lingered several feet behind him, not quite near enough to step in, yet not quite far enough to feign disinterest. "You fail to grasp the consequences of your actions," Ethan stated, altering his approach. "You made me appear utterly foolish back there. You see, my supervisor is Facebook friends with Dad. What transpires when this information circulates? When word gets out that my younger sister founded a company of such immense value, and I was completely unaware, I'll be perceived as a laughingstock." There it was. Not solicitude for me, not an interest in my endeavors, but sheer apprehension regarding his reputation. "Your primary fear is appearing unintelligent," I observed. My deepest dread once was perishing in a corridor because no one heeded my cries of distress. That encapsulates the disparity between us. My father bristled. "Now that is entirely unwarranted. We have consistently shown concern for you." "You cared about the rendition of me that posed no challenge to your comfort," I responded. "The composed nurse, the supportive assistant, the attentive confidant. You possessed a predetermined role for her. You lack a blueprint for this current iteration." My mother moved nearer, wringing her hands anxiously. "We're striving to comprehend. We're endeavoring to genuinely celebrate your achievements. But it wounds us, Chloe. It pains us that you didn't confide in us about this. That you deliberately excluded us." I swallowed, meticulously selecting my subsequent words. "I wasn't the one who excluded you. You were the ones who disengaged. Every instance you interrupted me to pose another query to Ethan. Every occasion you overlooked my timetable, yet committed his to memory." every time you instructed me to rejoice in your brother's success while I was suffering. Do you truly believe being disregarded leaves no lasting marks?" Ethan sneered. "This is preposterous. You're behaving as if you endured some form of mistreatment. You had shelter, sustenance, a reputable education. You possessed every conceivable benefit." "Except for being acknowledged," I uttered softly. "Except for being prioritized." The corridor seemed cramped, the walls pressing in. For a moment, I contemplated tempering my words, retracting them, perhaps making a jest to alleviate the strain. That ingrained habit was potent. However, I then recalled all the evenings I spent collapsing into bed, my eyes stinging from hours of screen gazing after 12 hours on my feet, constructing something no one in this household had faith in. That young woman merited more than for me to retreat. "Now, this is what will transpire," I declared, astonishing even myself with the firmness of my tone. "I am departing. You will contend with this reality. Perhaps you'll become incensed and lament to one another about my supposed ingratitude. Perhaps you'll experience remorse. Perhaps you'll attempt to feign that nothing occurred. That is your prerogative. But from this moment forward, if you desire involvement in my life, not my finances, but my life itself, it will be under revised conditions." My father furrowed his brow. "What specific conditions?" "You cease drawing comparisons between me and Ethan," I stated. "You stop dismissing my achievements as mere coincidences. You stop soliciting favors from me that you would never anticipate from him. And you offer an apology, not solely for this evening, but for the preceding 2 decades. Ethan flung his hands upward in exasperation. "Apologize for what precisely? For attaining success?" "No," I clarified, "for belittling me to elevate yourself, for deriding my work when you failed to comprehend it, for utilizing me as evidence that you were the exceptional individual." He recoiled slightly at that remark. "You have no comprehension of the constant pressure one endures," he mumbled, "of everyone relying on you to succeed." "You are correct," I conceded. "I don't understand what it's like to have individuals place their faith in me before I've demonstrated anything. My sole experience is mending people throughout the night and subsequently expending my remaining mental energy constructing something, while those who ostensibly loved me most dismissed it as a risky venture. Our formative years differed profoundly, despite sharing the same home." For a brief interval, silence prevailed. Then, my mother performed an action I genuinely hadn't anticipated. She began to weep. Not the theatrical tears she occasionally deployed to quell disagreements, but unbridled, raw sobs that caused her to clutch at the wall as if seeking stability. "We are responsible for this," she confessed to my father, her voice faltering. "We shaped them into this, unknowingly setting them against each other. I genuinely thought we were simply motivating him because he required it. I assumed she was perfectly all right." My father's shoulders sagged, all defiance dissipating from him. "We erred," he admitted softly. "We made a mistake, and it cannot be reversed." Ethan's gaze shifted between them, then settled on me. And for the very first time, I discerned an emotion in his eyes I had never witnessed previously. Fear. Not fear of me, but apprehension of forfeiting this existence where he consistently held the favored position. "So, what exactly?" he rasped. "You'll sever ties with us. You'll vanish into your affluent circles and completely disregard our existence." I shook my head. "No," I countered. "I am constructing a reality where I thrive, regardless of whether you acknowledge me. You are welcome to participate if you're prepared to exert the effort. If not, I will be perfectly fine. For the first time, I genuinely understand this truth." I took my coat from the hook near the door. My mother reached out for me, then paused, as if realizing that hollow assurances would be ineffective this time. "We'll contact you," she murmured faintly. Once we've deliberated on what to express." "Take all the time you need," I responded. "Just don't call me to request financial aid." Ethan's cheeks reddened. "I would never." "You already alluded to it," I interjected. "You inquired about how this would affect your professional standing. You're apprehensive that your boss will discover your younger sister is ostensibly more accomplished than you. Here's a revelation, that's not my concern. You have your own journey to undertake." I stepped outside into the frigid air, which was sharp but invigorating. Behind me, the muffled sounds of my family's disputes swelled and receded. It was painful. Naturally, it was painful. Yet beneath the pain, something else was burgeoning, a peculiar, potent sense of tranquility. For once, I had not constricted myself to conform to their preconceived notions. I walked toward my car, feeling as though my resolve was unyielding. During the weeks following Christmas, my family behaved precisely as I had foreseen. They became silent. No group messages, no New Year greetings, no humorous images from my mother. Initially, the quiet felt akin to standing in a post-fire room, detecting the scent of smoke and uncertain of what remained intact. Instead, I immersed myself in my new circumstances. This involved meetings with the acquiring corporation, strategic discussions regarding VitalSync's expansion, and tour of various hospitals where nurses brightened upon observing the streamlined nature of their tasks. For the first time, my daily interactions were with individuals who prioritized my intellect, rather than my position within a family structure. I also undertook something that would have intimidated my former self. I scheduled therapy. Not because I was damaged, but because I was weary of carrying past traumas into new environments. Many of those sessions centered on my parents, exploring how being the overlooked child could appear simpler than being the difficult one, yet it relentlessly erodes you. We discussed how favoritism isn't merely unjust. It constitutes a type of emotional neglect for everyone affected. My therapist shared an insight that resonated deeply. When a family designates a golden child, they don't only harm the scapegoat or the unseen child. They also predispose the favored child to collapse when reality doesn't afford them the same preferential treatment. I didn't fully grasp her meaning until the second week of January when Ethan telephoned. I gazed at his name illuminated on my phone for an extended period before responding. "Hello," I uttered, maintaining an even tone. "Hey," he replied, his voice sounding subdued. "Do you have a moment to chat?" "What's going on?" I inquired. A silence followed, then a sardonic chuckle. "Remember when I mentioned your little spectacle at dinner would make me seem incompetent at work?" "I do," I confirmed. "You seemed quite worried about that." "Yeah, well," he admitted. "It turns out I managed to accomplish that quite effectively all on my own." He hesitantly recounted that, having been exhilarated by his promotion, the one my parents had essentially orchestrated a celebration for, he had become careless. He had uttered client names in a bar, an inappropriate action. He had dispatched an email containing an incorrect attachment. He had made several poor judgments in an attempt to impress a senior associate. Nothing illegal, but sufficient to unnerve those in higher positions. "They stated I've become distracted," he concluded. "That my performance doesn't align with my demeanor. They're reevaluating my professional trajectory." "I genuinely regret that," I responded, and my sincerity was absolute. Not because I experienced culpability, I didn't. Rather, because witnessing the disintegration of someone's identity is distressing, even when that identity rested upon a precarious foundation. "Why are you sharing this with me?" "Because," he exhaled heavily, "for the first time, I grasp it, even if only partially. What it feels like when your entire self-worth is intrinsically linked to what others anticipate you will become, rather than who you authentically are. And when that begins to falter, you lose sense of your identity without it." I settled onto my couch, the import of his words enveloping me. "You could have realized that without diminishing me," I remarked gently. "However, I'm pleased you're perceiving it now. Mom keeps insisting we should apologize," he blurted out. "Dad admits he doesn't know how to begin." "They're profoundly troubled by this, Chloe. About you, about themselves, about everything. They don't require a flawless speech," I stated. "They simply need to articulate the truth, no matter how unpleasant." A week subsequently, they did precisely that. My parents extended an invitation to meet at a cafe situated halfway between my residence and theirs. They appeared a decade older than I remembered, not due to my triumphs, but from finally confronting their ingrained behaviors. My mother wept again, but this time she refrained from attempting to dominate the narrative. My father confessed, his eyes moist, that he had harbored fear of me surpassing him in ways he couldn't comprehend. Consequently, it had been simpler to jest about Ethan's career. Both articulated the words I had scarcely dared to hope for. "We sincerely apologize. We were mistaken. We cannot undo the years we made you feel secondary. We wish to improve if you'll permit us." I did not succumb to an embrace. I did not resolve everything with a single hug. I candidly informed them, "I appreciate this. I also require time. I don't yet place my trust in mere words. I need to observe your actions." Following this, I established boundaries. I informed them I was not their retirement provision. I told them I would not be rescuing Ethan from any ill-advised investments or settling their mortgage simply because I possessed the means. I cautioned them that if they ever disparaged my nursing profession or again treated my work as an accident, I would withdraw. They listened. Truly listened. And over the ensuing year, gradually, arduously, they began to transform. They posed inquiries about my work and didn't immediately redirect the conversation to Ethan after mere seconds. They respected my assertion that I was fatigued from a shift and unable to converse. They started catching themselves when they reverted to old habits. My mother would interrupt herself mid-sentence and remark, "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" before correcting her behavior. Regarding Ethan, he retained his employment, but his progression at the company stabilized. The rapid advancement ceased. The incessant commendation ended. Initially, he resented this. Subsequently, he began to distinguish his intrinsic identity from his professional accomplishments. He genuinely apologized to me, an apology devoid of justifications or jesting evasions. And then, months following that Christmas, he posed a question that astonished me more than any other event in this entire narrative. "Do you believe," he asked, "you'd ever permit me to intern or be employed by something you develop, not as your brother, but simply as an individual beginning anew?" I pondered his query for a protracted moment. "Perhaps," I replied, "if you're amenable to commencing at the lowest level and being instructed by individuals who are not swayed by your surname." He chuckled, but a sense of modesty permeated it this time. Understood. This is what I gleaned from these experiences, and what I hope anyone observing would internalize. Parental favoritism is not merely inequitable. It inflicts a gradual form of damage. It conveys to one child that they are perpetually inadequate, and to another that their sufficiency is contingent upon their brilliance. It instills self-doubt in the disregarded child and paralyzing fear of failure in the favored one. Asserting oneself within such a dynamic is not self-centered. It is essential for self-preservation. Establishing limits with your parents is not an act of disrespect. Occasionally, it represents the sole method to disrupt a cyclical behavior that would otherwise perpetuate across generations. Furthermore, your inherent worth does not originate when your family at last acknowledges it. It has consistently existed. My parents' years of overlooking me did not negate my intrinsic value. It merely postponed the moment they were compelled to confront it. The Crimson Echo team is committed to developing significant, emotionally resonant narratives that mirror genuine life challenges. We guarantee that these are fictional tales conceived exclusively to impart valuable insights and constructive educational content to our audience. This screenplay underscores the pedagogical importance of self-esteem, emotional perimeters, and the enduring ramifications of family bias. It prompts viewers to contemplate mental well-being, constructive dialogue, and the significance of appreciating each individual's latent capabilities. Through this narrative, our aspiration is for individuals to cultivate more deferential, empathetic, and nurturing connections in their personal lives.